I never thought I'd be the one to stir up the drama in my husband's perfect family. But here I am, sitting in this fancy restaurant, my hands trembling as I stare at my husband's golden child older brother, Nick, across the table. I had always kept my distance from Harry's family. We married 3 years ago, me, a receptionist at a small dental office, and Harry, a successful engineer from a well-off family. I was just happy to live a quiet life with him, away from the family's wealth, their high expectations, and their judgments. But when I finally spoke up at that family dinner, everything came crashing down. It all started so innocently. Dinner at Harry's family home, celebrating Bob's birthday. The kind of dinner where the table is so formal you can almost hear the clinking of fine china. But the air between us was thick, filled with unspoken tension. Nick, Harry's older brother, had always made small, cutting comments. At first I ignored them. I thought he was just being the charming, rich bachelor everyone adored. That was, until I caught his gaze for just a moment longer than necessary, and then it hit me. He knew something about me, something I had kept buried for years. "Do you remember the wild parties at college?" he asked, looking directly at me. A light laugh followed his words, but it was anything but innocent. Everyone turned to look at me. Sophie, his girlfriend, glanced nervously between us. I could feel my heart beating wildly in my chest. I hadn't been the party girl Nick was trying to paint me as. Sure, I had been to a few college parties, but that was normal. Yet Nick was going to make sure that everyone thought otherwise. That was when I decided enough was enough. I wasn't going to sit there and let him spread lies about me, about my past, about who I was. I stood up, shaking but resolute, and I turned to him. "What about you, Nick?" I asked. "Remember the campus security report from our sophomore year? Or those harassment complaints that mysteriously vanished because of your family's connections?" The table went silent. The clinking of glasses stopped. Nick's smug smile faltered for the first time in years. And that was when the floodgates opened. The truth spilled out, unraveling everything, from Nick's past of manipulation and lies to the way his family had always covered for him. As the evening unfolded, it became clear that the golden child wasn't so perfect after all, and the family that had always treated me with suspicion was about to get a harsh dose of reality. This was only the beginning. My name is Emily, and I'm 29. My husband, Harry, is 32, and we've been married for 3 years. When we first met, I never imagined I'd end up in this world, surrounded by wealth, family expectations, and tension that seemed to seep into every conversation. Harry and I had been together for 5 years before we got married. He was charming, successful, and, in many ways, everything I had hoped for. He worked as an engineer and had built a stable life for himself, something that drew me to him in a way I couldn't ignore. We met in a small coffee shop downtown when I was still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. He was sitting alone, reading a book. I remember how different he looked from the usual crowd I was used to. There was something calm about him, a quiet strength that I admired. He caught my eye, smiled, and it felt like the beginning of something meant to be. We had a traditional relationship at first. I'd visit him at his small apartment, and we'd go on long walks or talk for hours over dinner. Harry's family wasn't what I was used to. They lived in a large house in the suburbs, where everything was polished, neat, and always formal. I grew up in a small apartment with my mother and younger brother, never knowing what it was like to have a family reputation to uphold. But when I married Harry, I was drawn into it. The pressure, the perfection, the judgments, they were all part of the package. When I first met his family, I noticed immediately how they watched me. They were polite, yes, but always with a cold distance. Harry's mother, Molly, a poised and business-minded woman, was a board member of several charities. His father, Bob, was a retired construction company owner who carried himself with an air of superiority. Despite their wealth, they never seemed entirely comfortable around me. It wasn't because I wasn't polite or didn't try to fit in. It was as if they had already made up their minds about me. And that was before I even met Nick. Nick was everything Harry wasn't: arrogant, entitled, and always with a snide remark ready to go. He was 35 at the time, and I knew from the moment I laid eyes on him that he had a reputation in the family for being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But there was something about the way he looked at me when we were introduced that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just a look of curiosity. It was as if he knew something about me, something I'd kept hidden from everyone. At first, I didn't think much of it, but over the months, as I spent more time with Harry's family, I began to see the little comments Nick made. They were subtle, offhand, but always directed at me. He would bring up my past, things I hadn't told Harry, in front of his family, making me uncomfortable. I thought maybe I was just overreacting, but then I started to notice his behavior more. The way he looked at me when I walked into the room, the way he smiled when he spoke about the wild college days that he claimed I had lived through. It was as if he had some kind of power over me, like he knew a secret and he was going to use it against me. What I didn't know was that Nick had been telling his family a completely different version of my past. He painted me as someone who had been reckless in college, someone who wasn't worthy of being with Harry. He told them that I was the kind of person who trapped Harry into marriage, saying I was a liar, that I had misrepresented myself to get into this family. The worst part was, Harry believed me when I told him it wasn't true, but he was too afraid to confront his brother. He didn't want to cause drama in the family. He told me to just let it go. But how could I let it go when Nick's words were affecting the way his family saw me? I knew the truth about Nick, though. I knew about his past, the things he had done on campus that no one seemed to talk about, the rumors about his involvement in harassment complaints, the way campus security had gotten involved, but somehow, miraculously, nothing ever came of it. I knew about his failed business ventures and the accusations of misusing funds, but it was all buried under layers of money and influence. The family had always protected him, but I wasn't going to let him continue to lie about me. Not anymore. The tension was always there, lurking beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. But it wasn't until Harry's family began to grow colder towards me that I realized just how deep the rift between us had become. Nick's subtle attacks were becoming more frequent, more calculated. At family gatherings, he would tell stories about wild college parties, looking at me with a grin that sent chills down my spine. Every time he mentioned those stories, the same uneasy feeling crept over me. I began to question my decision to stay silent for so long. Every comment felt like a tiny cut, each one more deliberate than the last. And then there was the dinner with Harry's Aunt Ellen at Bob's birthday celebration. She wasn't direct, but her words still cut through me like a knife. She casually remarked that some people marry into families for the wrong reasons, her gaze shifting toward me with a look that said everything. I couldn't let it slide anymore. The questions about my past, the whispers about my reputation, they were all starting to get to me. I had worked so hard to build a life with Harry, to prove that I wasn't the person Nick had painted me as, but his family wasn't buying it. Harry noticed the change in me, the way I started to withdraw from family gatherings, the way my once eager smile faded into forced politeness. He asked me if something was wrong, and I told him I was just tired. But deep down, I knew the real issue was Nick. I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't explain how deeply hurt I was by the way his family was treating me. They weren't just questioning my past. They were questioning my worth, my character. And it was all because of Nick's lies. It wasn't just the family anymore. It was the constant tension in the air when Harry and I were alone. He had always been supportive, but he wasn't confronting his brother. He kept telling me to let it go, to rise above it, but how could I? How could I continue to let someone tear me down in front of my husband and his family? But as much as I wanted to confront Nick, I knew Harry wasn't ready for that. He didn't want to cause drama. He said it again and again, hoping that everything would blow over, that somehow the tension would ease, but it didn't. It only got worse. Nick started to pull away from the family, using his charm and influence to keep them on his side. Molly, his mother, started to ask more questions about my background. It was like an interrogation disguised as casual conversation, always probing, always trying to find some flaw in me. Every time I answered her questions, I felt like I was being scrutinized under a microscope. I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when the truth was eating away at me. But it wasn't just Nick's lies anymore. It was the lies I had been telling myself. I had told myself that I could handle it, that I could let it go, that it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered that my husband's family believed the worst about me, that they thought I was someone I wasn't, and it mattered that no one was standing up for me. I decided in that moment that I couldn't stay silent any longer. The next time Nick tried to bring up college parties, I wasn't going to brush it off. The next time he made a comment about my past, I was going to confront him. It didn't matter if it caused a scene. It didn't matter if it made Harry uncomfortable. I had been silent for too long, and now it was time for the truth to come out. I wasn't going to let Nick continue to manipulate his family into believing his version of events. It was time to take control of my own story. The evening of Bob's birthday dinner was supposed to be just like every other family gathering, formal, polite, and predictable. But that night, everything came to a head. As I sat at the long, beautifully set table, my stomach churned. The tension in the room was palpable, but no one was saying anything. It was as if everyone knew something had shifted, but no one was brave enough to speak up. Not yet, anyway. Nick had been on his usual charm offensive, smiling that smarmy smile, talking about his latest business ventures and throwing in little jabs here and there. At first, I tried to ignore it, but as the evening wore on, his comments became sharper, more pointed. It was like he was looking for a way to make me crack. He kept talking about his wild college days, mentioning parties I supposedly had attended, never once considering that he was the one who had spread these lies about me. The more he talked, the more I felt my anger simmering beneath the surface. I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands starting to tremble, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be the one who caused a scene. But then it happened. Nick looked straight at me, his grin widening. "You must remember those parties well," he said, almost smugly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You always seemed to be at the center of things, didn't you?" The table went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. Sophie, Nick's girlfriend, glanced nervously between us, clearly unsure of what was happening. Molly's eyes narrowed, and I could see the subtle judgment on her face. But it was Harry's silence that stung the most. He didn't say a word. Instead, he just stared at his plate, pretending not to hear. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting Nick. I was fighting his entire family. They had believed his lies, and they were willing to let them slide. They'd let him manipulate them into thinking I was something I wasn't. That was when I snapped. I put down my fork with a sharp clink. The noise seemed to echo through the room, and everyone turned to look at me. My voice came out steady, but my heart was racing. "What about you, Nick?" I asked, my words cutting through the tension. "Do you remember the harassment complaints from our sophomore year, or the way campus security had to get involved because of your behavior?" I paused, watching his face falter for a moment. "You remember the investigation into that student organization you ran, right? The one where money went missing and suddenly no one talked about it anymore? Funny how things disappear when you have money and connections." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, I thought I might have gone too far, but then I saw it. Nick's face. His confident, smug expression shattered in an instant. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. I continued, not giving him a chance to recover. "Maybe you should ask Sophie about the reports filed by female students who said you made them uncomfortable. Maybe she'd like to know what the rest of us already knew about you." Nick's face twisted in anger. "You're lying," he spat, standing up from the table. "This is just jealousy. You're trying to ruin my reputation because my family never fully accepted you." But before I could say anything more, Harry's uncle, Frank, spoke up. His voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "I've heard those rumors before," Frank said, his eyes never leaving Nick. "Years ago. Bob had to hire a lawyer when Nick was in college to handle some complaints. I thought it was just a misunderstanding, but now it seems like it was more than that." Molly opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was too shocked to speak. The family had always protected Nick, but now cracks were beginning to form in their perfect image of him. Sophie stood up abruptly, her face pale. "I need to go," she said, her voice trembling. Nick tried to follow her, but she was already walking out the door. The dinner was over before it had even really begun. The family began to filter out, some leaving quietly, others in hushed conversations. I could feel their eyes on me as I stood there, heart pounding, a mixture of fear and relief washing over me. The truth was finally out. I didn't regret what I had said, but I could feel the weight of the consequences already bearing down on me. I had exposed Nick for who he truly was, but in doing so, I had also exposed myself. The fallout was going to be brutal, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up the act of being the calm, composed wife. But I had done it. I had finally stood up for myself. Later that evening, Harry and I drove home in silence. When we walked into our apartment, Harry turned to me, his face a mixture of frustration and concern. I wish you told me you were going to do that, he said quietly. I didn't respond right away. The words felt stuck in my throat. I didn't plan it, I finally said. It just came out. After everything he's done to me, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Harry sighed, running the hand through his hair. I understand, he said, but there was a hint of something else in his voice. But now, everything's going to be a mess. My family is never going to look at you the same way again. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure if Harry even realized the gravity of what had just happened. I wasn't just fighting Nick anymore. I was fighting for my place in this family, and I wasn't going to back down. The days that followed that dinner were a blur of emotions. I was numb, yet there was a sense of relief that came with finally telling the truth. For 2 years, I had let Nick's lies fester in the background, slowly poisoning my relationship with Harry's family. And now the truth was out there, echoing through the room, and there was no taking it back. Part of me wished I had handled it differently, that I hadn't laid bare so many secrets in front of everyone, but there was no denying it anymore. I couldn't undo what had been said. Harry was quiet for the rest of the night. He didn't yell or accuse me, but I could feel the tension between us, a silent weight that pressed down on both of us as we went through our nightly routine. I wanted to talk to him, to explain why I had done it, to ask if he understood why I couldn't keep quiet anymore. But he didn't open up to me. His silence was more suffocating than any argument could have been. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I had said to Nick. The words had felt so right in the moment, like they were coming from a place deep inside me that I'd been ignoring for too long. But now I wondered if I had pushed too far. Had I ruined everything by airing out so many secrets? Was this really worth it? The next morning, Harry and I exchanged only a few words. He was distant, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. I could tell that my actions the night before had shaken him, but he wasn't ready to talk about it. Instead, he went to work, and I went about my day, trying to focus on anything but the family drama that was about to engulf us. By the time the evening came, Harry was home later than usual. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on him. His phone had buzzed several times while we ate dinner. Texts from his mother, calls from his aunt, and some from his cousin who had been at the dinner. They were all asking questions, wanting explanations, and most importantly, they were demanding answers about what had happened. But Harry hadn't responded to any of them. As we cleaned up after dinner, he finally spoke, his voice quiet but heavy. My family. They're asking about last night, about you, about everything. He looked at me then, his gaze filled with a mixture of frustration and something else I couldn't quite place. They think I should be the one to fix this, that I should have stopped you before you said everything you did. I felt my heart tighten. The pain in his voice wasn't just about the family, it was about me. I had put him in the middle of this mess, and now he had to choose between standing by me and standing by his family. Harry, I said softly, stepping toward him. I didn't want to make you choose, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't let Nick keep lying about me, about who I am. You have to understand that. He looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to read my face, to understand the depth of what had happened. I do understand, he said, though his tone was distant. But now it's too late to take it back. My family, they're never going to look at you the same way again. You've embarrassed them, and I don't know if we can ever fix this. His words hit me like a slap to the face. I hadn't meant to hurt him. I had only wanted to clear my name, to finally feel like I was seen for who I truly was. But in doing so, I had torn apart his family's image, and now it felt like I was the one who had destroyed everything. I'm sorry, I whispered, though it didn't feel like enough. I never wanted this. I never wanted to cause problems between us. But I couldn't keep living like this, hiding from the truth. You have to understand, Harry. I had to say something. I know, he replied, his voice softer now, though his eyes were still filled with doubt. I wish you had handled it differently. I wish we could have done this without tearing everything apart. I nodded, my chest tightening. There was no easy way to fix what had happened. I could feel the distance growing between us with every passing second. I had done the right thing, but it was clear that the fallout was far from over. The next day, I received a call from Harry's cousin. She apologized for Nick's behavior at the dinner and said she believed me. But her words, though kind, couldn't erase the reality of the situation. Nick had manipulated the family for years, and now the truth was out. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a betrayal of everything I had worked for in this marriage. Harry and I didn't speak much that day. He had become more distant, and it felt like I was losing him bit by bit. That night, he sat across from me, his face etched with worry. "My family wants to talk," he said quietly. "They're all upset, but they don't know how to approach you. They want to make sure this doesn't tear us apart." I could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of the decision he was facing. I had never wanted to be the cause of this kind of conflict, but now I was. "Harry, I didn't want this. I didn't want to cause problems for you or your family," I said, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep living like this, pretending that everything's okay when it's not." Harry reached across the table, taking my hand in his. His touch was warm, but there was still a distance between us that hadn't been there before. I know you didn't mean to, but now we have to figure out how to fix it, for both of us." But I couldn't help but wonder, could we ever fix this? Could we rebuild the trust that had been shattered, not just between us, but with his family? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Nick win. I wasn't going to let him destroy everything I had worked for, everything Harry and I had built together. But at what cost? The days after that dinner felt like a slow-motion train wreck. The family's reactions came in waves, each more dramatic than the last. My phone buzzed constantly, texts and missed calls piling up, all from Harry's family, all wanting to talk, to understand, to blame. At first, Harry had tried to downplay it, saying everything would blow over with time. But deep down, I knew better. We had crossed a point of no return, and there was no going back. The damage had been done, and now we were both left to pick up the pieces. It wasn't long before Harry started receiving calls from his mother. Molly, ever the formal and polite matriarch, had never quite warmed to me, but this was different. There was an underlying tension in her voice, one that said she no longer saw me as the woman she had reluctantly accepted into her family. She wanted answers, explanations, and most of all, she wanted to make sure I knew the consequences of what I had done. "Molly wants us to meet," Harry said one evening, his voice heavy with frustration. He was sitting at the kitchen table, rubbing his temples as if the weight of it all was too much for him to bear. "She says she wants to work through this as a family, but I don't know if I can do this anymore." I felt the sting of his words, though I couldn't blame him. The pressure was suffocating. Molly had always been distant, polite, but detached, but now I could sense the disapproval in her every word. As the days passed, I realized just how much power his family held over our lives. They didn't just have money and status. They had control. They had control over Harry, and, by extension, they had control over me too. Every conversation I had with Harry felt like I was talking to a man who was slowly slipping away from me, torn between the woman he loved and the family who couldn't accept me. It didn't help that Nick was nowhere to be found. After the dinner, he disappeared from the family scene, leaving no explanation, just a string of cryptic text messages to his mother. Harry's phone buzzed every few hours with another message from Molly or Bob. It was always the same question: "Where's Nick? Why won't he respond to us?" The silence from him was deafening, and it was clear to everyone that he had no intention of coming back into the fold anytime soon. The family was unraveling, and no one knew how to stop it. Then, just as things were starting to feel like they might calm down, another bombshell dropped. One of Harry's cousins, who had been present at the dinner, reached out to me with an apology. Her message was brief, but the guilt in her words was clear. She said she had believed Nick for years, that she had never questioned the things he had said about me. But after hearing what I had said, after seeing how his family responded, she wasn't so sure anymore. "I'm so sorry," she texted. "I never realized what he was doing. But I believe you, and I think you've been right all along." It was a small victory, a flicker of support in a sea of opposition. But it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't going to change how Harry's family saw me. The damage had been done, and no amount of apologies could take away the hurt. The next few days were filled with tension-filled meetings, phone calls with family members who either tried to defend Nick or offered lukewarm apologies for his behavior. There was a sense of denial, too, as if they couldn't fully accept the truth about their golden child. And every time someone called to apologize or defend Nick, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. Harry was caught in the middle, trying to appease everyone, trying to hold the fragile threads of our marriage together, while I was left to wonder if any of it was worth it. But then, the final straw came. It was a Thursday evening, just a few days after I had received the cousin's apology, when I came home from work to find Harry in a state of agitation. He had been pacing around the apartment, his phone in hand, clearly upset. When I walked in, he didn't greet me with his usual warm smile. Instead, he looked at me with a mix of anger and confusion, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's Nick," he said, his voice tight. "He's telling everyone that I've sided with you, that I've turned my back on him. He says I'm betraying my own blood." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It felt like a betrayal, the culmination of everything Nick had been doing behind the scenes for months. I had always known that he was manipulative, but now I could see just how deep his control over Harry really went. He had twisted everything, turned it all around, and now he was playing the victim. And Harry, my husband, the man who I thought had my back, was caught in the middle of it all. "He's blaming me for this?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. "He's blaming me for telling the truth?" "He's playing the victim," Harry muttered, running a hand through his hair. "And it's working. I don't know what to do anymore. My family's not talking to me. They're saying I'm betraying them. I'm supposed to support you, but this is all falling apart, Emily. I don't know if I can keep doing this." The weight of his words hit me harder than anything he had said before. Harry was conflicted. He didn't know which side to take, his family's or mine. I could see the cracks in his resolve, the guilt weighing on him, but I also knew that I couldn't bear this on my own any longer. "I can't keep doing this either," I said, my voice raw with emotion. "I can't keep fighting for a family that doesn't want me. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. You're my husband, Harry. But this—" I trailed off, not knowing how to finish my sentence. Harry stood still, staring at me, the distance between us widening with every passing second. His phone buzzed again, a message from his mother, but he didn't pick it up. He just stared at me, as if waiting for me to give him the answer, as if I could fix everything with a single word. "I don't know what to do anymore, Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I just don't." The days after that conversation felt like a slow descent into an emotional abyss. Harry and I barely spoke. Every time we were in the same room, the silence between us felt suffocating. The weight of what I had said, what I had done, was heavier than I could have ever imagined. The truth was out, but at what cost? My marriage, my place in Harry's family, everything was unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. Every text message, every phone call from Harry's family felt like another blow to my chest. His mother, Molly, sent long, carefully worded texts trying to understand what had happened, trying to make sense of the rift that had formed between us. She told Harry that it was all misunderstanding, that I had overreacted, and that I had ruined the family's image. She blamed me for everything, as though my desire to speak the truth was some kind of personal attack on her perfect family. Molly's words cut deep. But it wasn't just her, it was everyone. Bob barely looked at me when we crossed paths. Harry's Aunt Ellen, always so poised and proper, had been one of the first to accuse me of creating unnecessary drama. They weren't just upset about the dinner, they were upset about the fact that I had exposed their golden child, their perfect son, for who he really was. The truth had shattered their illusion of a flawless family, and now they needed someone to blame. And I had become that someone. I tried to hold it together for the sake of my marriage, for the sake of Harry. I tried to pretend that everything would be okay, that we could move past this. But every time I looked at him, I saw the conflict in his eyes. I saw the hurt and the disappointment. He didn't know what to do with me anymore, and that hurt more than anything Nick had ever said or done. He didn't know if he could choose me over his family, over the years of loyalty that had been drilled into him. I spent my days at work, my mind constantly replaying the events of that dinner. What if I had handled it differently? What if I had kept quiet, let Nick continue to lie, and simply kept the peace? The what-ifs gnawed at me, making the days feel longer, heavier. Every moment with Harry felt like walking on eggshells, every word spoken carefully, as if we were both waiting for the other to break. And eventually, we did. One evening, a week after the dinner, Harry came home later than usual. I could tell from the moment he walked in that something had shifted. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow, as though the weight of everything had finally broken him. He didn't speak at first, just dropped his briefcase by the door and walked straight to the kitchen, running a hand through his hair, his movements stiff and mechanical. "Harry," I said quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on? What's happening?" He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. I already knew. "They're still calling," he said, his voice low and heavy with frustration. "My mother. My aunt." They all think I'm betraying them. They think I've turned against my family because of you." His words hit me like a cold slap. The guilt crept in again, heavier than ever before. I had thought I was doing the right thing, but now, with the weight of his family's disappointment bearing down on him, I wasn't so sure anymore. "I don't know what they want from me, Emily," Harry continued, his voice breaking. "They want me to choose them. And I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can keep fighting this battle." I felt my chest tighten as the tears began to well up in my eyes. "I never wanted to make you choose, Harry. I never wanted this. I couldn't let Nick keep lying about me. I couldn't keep letting him control everything." He turned to me then, his eyes filled with pain and uncertainty. "But now everything's falling apart. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know who I'm supposed to be loyal to, my wife or my family." His words, so raw and honest, made the tears spill over. I had tried to hold it together for so long, but the truth was, I was exhausted. I was exhausted from fighting, from trying to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. I had fought for our marriage, for our future, but now it felt like I was losing everything. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," Harry whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can keep trying to make things work when it feels like my family is falling apart because of me." I took a shaky breath, stepping closer to him. "I know it's hard," I said, my voice breaking. "I know this is tearing you apart, but I can't pretend like everything's fine when it's not. We can't keep living like this." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the anguish in his eyes, the tears threatening to spill over as he looked at me. "I don't know if we can fix this," he said, his voice filled with so much pain that it broke my heart. "I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were." And in that moment, I realized something. As much as I loved Harry, as much as I wanted to make things work, I couldn't keep living in this constant state of uncertainty. I couldn't keep fighting for a marriage that was being torn apart by lies and family loyalty. I had to let go. I took a deep breath and walked toward the door. Harry didn't follow me. I could feel the space between us growing wider, as if we were both already miles apart, drifting into separate worlds. The next few days were a blur. It was as though I had stepped into a different reality, one where every conversation with Harry was strained, every glance from his family felt like an accusation, and every moment in our apartment felt like a prison. I wasn't sure if I was still fighting for our marriage or if I had already lost it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing Harry, losing everything I had worked so hard to build. And yet, amidst all the chaos, there was something inside me that started to shift. It wasn't just about Nick's lies anymore. It wasn't about Harry's family or their judgment. It was about me, about who I was, and what I had become in this marriage. For the longest time, I had tried to please everyone, tried to fit into Harry's world, tried to keep his family happy, tried to stay quiet about the things that hurt me. But now I could see that I had been silencing myself for far too long. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, constantly holding my breath, waiting for the next attack or accusation. I couldn't continue to let their expectations define me. I had spent so much of my life trying to be what they wanted me to be, trying to be the good wife, the quiet daughter-in-law, the one who played by the rules. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself in the process. It was early one morning, after another sleepless night, when I realized something. I was so consumed by what Harry's family thought of me, so trapped by their judgment, that I had forgotten who I was fighting for in the first place. I had married Harry, not his family, and if I wanted to have a chance at saving anything, it had to start with me, my voice, my truth, and my decision to stop being afraid. I sat down at the kitchen table, taking a deep breath as I stared at the empty chair across from me, the chair where Harry usually sat. My heart was heavy, but I knew what I had to do. It was time to stop pretending. It was time to confront not just the situation with Nick, but the cracks in our marriage. It was time to stop hoping things would magically get better and take control of my own future. Later that morning, I found Harry sitting in his office, staring blankly at his laptop. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of exhaustion and frustration. He didn't look up when I entered the room, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to start. But I knew I had to speak up. The silence between us had gone on long enough. "Harry," I said softly, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "I need to talk to you." He looked up, his eyes tired but searching. "About what?" "About everything," I said, my heart racing as I took a seat across from him. "About Nick. About your family. About us. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay, like I don't feel trapped. I can't keep living like this, Harry. He opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, stopping him. I know you're torn. I know you want to fix everything, to make your family happy, to make this marriage work. But I can't keep being the one to carry all the weight. I can't keep fighting for a family that doesn't want me. And I can't keep fighting for a marriage that feels like it's slipping away. Harry's expression softened, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Emily, No, I interrupted, my voice firm now, my resolve clear. I don't want to hear apologies, Harry. I just need to know if we're still on the same page. I need to know if you can still see me, or if I'm just the woman who's caught in the middle of your family's drama. His silence was the loudest answer I could have gotten. It wasn't that he didn't care about me. Of course he did. But I could see it now, how much he had been weighed down by the pressure of his family's expectations. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how much I loved him, I couldn't be the one to fix everything. He had to make a choice. He had to choose if he was going to stand with me or if he was going to continue to let his family dictate his life. I'm not going to wait for you to decide, Harry, I said, standing up from the chair. I'm done waiting for you to fix this. I'm done waiting for your family to accept me. I can't keep living like this. I saw the pain in his eyes, but I also saw something else, a flicker of realization. He was beginning to understand. Maybe not fully, but I could see the shift in him. He was starting to see that I wasn't asking him to choose between me and his family. I was asking him to choose himself, to choose his own path, instead of letting his family's opinions define his life. I don't know what's going to happen now, he said quietly, his voice breaking, but I know I don't want to lose you. And in that moment, I knew that we weren't completely lost. We weren't beyond repair. But it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be a quick fix. We were going to have to rebuild, both our marriage and our trust in each other. But I wasn't willing to do it if it meant I had to keep pretending to be someone I wasn't. I don't want to lose you either, I said, my voice softening. But I can't keep living in this limbo. We need to make a decision, Harry. We need to decide if we're going to fight for us or if we're going to let everything else tear us apart. Harry nodded slowly, his eyes still filled with a mixture of regret and determination. I know. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight this battle. You don't have to do it alone, I said, my voice quiet but steady. But you have to choose, Harry, for both of us. The days after my conversation with Harry were filled with a sense of uncertainty, like we were both standing on the edge of something we couldn't control. There was no immediate resolution, no sense of closure. We still had to face the fallout from everything that had happened, the dinner, the truth about Nick, the way Harry's family had turned on me, and the deepening rift between us. But something had shifted in me. I had stopped waiting for someone else to fix things. I had stopped looking to Harry for answers. I had taken control of my own narrative, and in doing so, I realized I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. But it didn't make the consequences any easier to bear. The first call came from Harry's mother, Molly. She was polite, but there was an edge to her tone that made it clear she wasn't happy with how things had played out. I think it's time we have a real conversation, she said, her voice cold, almost businesslike. We need to discuss what happened at the dinner. You've caused quite a stir, Emily. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it was hard. I didn't cause this, Molly. Your son's behavior did. Your family has known for years what kind of person Nick is, but no one wanted to see the truth. I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her grappling with her words, trying to come up with the perfect response, the one that would make it all seem less messy. You've embarrassed us, Emily. And you've embarrassed Harry. This could have been handled differently, but instead you've made it public. Do you understand what you've done? I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before I spoke. I understand that the truth is hard to accept, but if you truly cared about Harry, you'd see that I wasn't the one who caused this. I was trying to protect him. From Nick. From all the lies. Molly's voice softened just slightly. I'm not sure I can agree with you on that, but I will say this. I've spoken to Harry, and I know he's torn. He's always been a good son, but we both know the damage this has caused. I don't know how to fix this, but you need to understand that you've changed everything, and I don't know if we can come back from that. Her words hit me harder than I expected. There was no offer of sympathy, no acknowledgement of how I had been treated by Nick and his family, only the cold reality that Harry's loyalty, like mine, was being tested in ways neither of us had anticipated. I knew I had exposed their family's darkest secrets, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a crushing weight on my chest. The fallout wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the unraveling of everything Harry had ever known, everything he had ever been told about loyalty, family, and right and wrong. Later that evening, Harry and I sat together, the air thick with unspoken words. He had tried to defend me to his family, but it felt like he was losing the battle. The more they pushed, the more he shrank. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the way he looked at me like I was the one who had caused all this mess. I had stood up for myself, but in doing so, I had inadvertently torn apart the life we had built together. "I don't know how to fix this, Emily," Harry said, his voice quiet and defeated. "I've tried to stand by you, but I feel like I'm losing my family, my place in it. I don't know what to do anymore." I felt a pang of guilt, but it wasn't for the reasons he thought. "Harry, you can't fix this. No one can. You have to understand that this wasn't just about the dinner. It's been building for years. Your family has protected Nick for so long that they couldn't see what he really is. I didn't want to destroy everything, but I couldn't keep lying to myself. You deserve the truth. We both do." Harry's face hardened, the weight of everything pressing down on him. "But at what cost, Emily? Look at what's happening now. I'm losing everything. I don't know if I can keep doing this." I knew I couldn't keep fighting for a marriage that was crumbling under the weight of family expectations. I had fought for us, for the truth, but Harry wasn't ready to see things clearly. Not yet. "I can't lose you, Harry," I said softly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. "But I can't keep being blamed for everything. You have to see that Nick is the one who has caused all of this. I didn't want it to come to this, but I had no choice." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he sat in silence, his face etched with the stress of the situation. "I don't know what the future holds, Emily, but right now, I don't even know if we're still on the same path. We need time. We both need time." The words hung in the air like a dagger. Time. How much time did we have left? I had fought for us, for him, for me. But now I wondered if the damage was irreparable, if the distance between us had grown too wide, too deep to ever cross again. A few days later, things took an unexpected turn. Nick's absence from the family began to raise questions, but it was more than just his silence. It was the news that began to trickle out, the stories from cousins, aunts, and uncles who had been swept up in the chaos. Slowly, they started to piece together the truth about Nick, about his fraudulent business ventures, his manipulation, and his toxic behavior. The walls of secrecy were crumbling, and with them, so was Nick's hold on his family. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of justice as I listened to the whispers in the background. It was too late for any kind of redemption, but at least the truth was out. At least they could no longer pretend that Nick was the perfect son, the perfect brother, the perfect man. But the cost was still too high. Harry didn't want to hear about the truth anymore. He didn't want to hear about how his family had failed him. All he could see was the damage it had caused, and I couldn't blame him. But I had done my part. I had spoken the truth. Now it was up to Harry to decide what mattered more, his family or the woman who had stood by him, even when everyone else turned their back on her. The days after the fallout felt strangely still, like the calm after a storm. It was clear that everything had changed. My marriage, my place in Harry's family, my entire world. But in that silence, I also found clarity. The fight for our marriage had exhausted me, but I had done what I needed to do. The truth had come out, and though it hadn't been easy, it had set something in motion. The question now wasn't about the past, it was about what came next. Harry and I had agreed to take a step back, to give each other space to figure out what we really wanted. For the first time in months, we weren't pretending. We weren't trying to please anyone but ourselves. The pain still lingered, but the weight of it wasn't as crushing as it had been. I had finally found my voice, and though it hadn't fixed everything, it had freed me in ways I hadn't imagined. The tension between us wasn't gone, but it was different now. We no longer talked in circles, trying to please everyone around us. We were honest with each other, more than we had ever been. Harry admitted that he still wasn't sure how to handle his family, how to rebuild what had been broken, but he also told me something that made my heart ache with bittersweet hope. "I still love you, Emily, but I need to figure out who I am outside of all this, outside of them." I knew what he meant. The family he had been loyal to for so long had been a part of him, shaping his every decision, every action. But now he had to carve out his own path, and I had to do the same. The truth was, no one could fix the damage that had been done, but we could both find our own healing. We didn't know what that looked like yet, but we were taking the first steps. As for Nick, the family was left to pick up the pieces of the illusion they had held onto for so long. His lies had unraveled, and with them, his reputation. It wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about the simple fact that truth, no matter how painful, would always come to light. Nick's absence from our lives wasn't a victory. It was just the reality we had to face. And as much as his actions had hurt me, they had ultimately given me the strength to stand up for myself. The family dynamics would never be the same. But for the first time in a long while, I could breathe. I could start to rebuild my life, piece by piece, without feeling like I was living under a cloud of lies and manipulation. I've learned a lot through this journey. I've learned that truth, no matter how messy, is always worth fighting for. That silence in the face of injustice only leads to more pain. That love is not about pleasing others, but about being true to who you are, even when it means standing alone. And most importantly, I've learned that healing starts from within. Harry and I are still figuring things out, but we're doing it on our own terms, not because we're afraid of the truth, but because we're ready to face it head on. And no matter where that journey takes us, I'm ready to walk it, stronger and more sure of myself than ever before. The future is uncertain, but I know one thing for sure. I'm not afraid to face it anymore.